Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "All labor that uplifts humanity has dignity and importance and should be undertaken with painstaking excellence. We are called to work to do just this, which is as important in our current cultural and ecclesiastical climate as it has ever been. Part of leadership is fully understanding that by God's grace, we are free to use the gifts that God has given us, gifts to enact change for the betterment of God's creation and God's people. God requires that all of us do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God. By the gift of grace and the Spirit, I am able to do just that. As a leader, I seek out ecumenical dialogue and action for myself, and help others grow towards that as well. During my life, I have been blessed to experience and build relationships with peoples of many different faith traditions, as well as worship with them in those traditions. I take very seriously our call not only for Christian unity, but for peace and conversation among people of all faiths. Not only have I engaged in dialogue with Pentecostals, fundamentalists, evangelicals, and Catholics, but also Muslims, agnostics, and Jews. For our world to fully realize peace and God's call to make God's kingdom here on earth, undertaking the task of being peacemakers and agents of justice is a part of that call. We live in an ever-changing world, a world in which injustice, division, and inequality have a strong presence. As a leader in the church, I see the impetus to strive for justice, unity, and equality. The good news is that we are all God's children and are heirs of God's kingdom. As Paul told the church in Corinth, we are each given unique gifts. I believe that my God-given gifts, like teaching, compassion, empathy, and a servant's heart, equip me to the ministry to which God is calling me, a ministry of word and sacrament. A leader is nothing if not a servant. Paul constantly referred to himself as a servant or slave of God. The church needs these types of leaders to tirelessly endeavor to enact change in the world. Jesus himself sets the example as the archetype of a leader and servant as he washes his disciples' feet. As a pastor in the ELCA, I will be a servant of God's people and an advocate and steward of God's creation. We are called to be champions of justice and liberation for the widow, the orphan, the stranger, the poor. I see the ELCA being a place of sanctuary and refuge for these and for all of God's creation. As a leader in the church, I am called to continue to make that possible and to enable myself and God's people to be always reforming. We engage with the gospel, with Christ, when we love God and when we love our sisters and brothers. Through theological education, practical ministerial experience, and new relationships, I see God laying out the path through which I can continuously study the Word, rely on God's grace, and be a proactive member of the body of Christ. Through this, I hope to use my gifts to enact God's desire for wholeness and peace for God's creation and people through word and sacrament.